right, all right. Well, good morning once again. Thank you for joining us for this panel entitled Collaborating Through Uncertainty. Before we get into all of this, I would like to give a disclaimer. Okay? This conversation can be triggering. Admittedly, it triggers me at some point. So we are all going to be, of course, mindful while being as honest and as transparent as possible. And I think that's important. I am a big believer in naming the thing, right? We can't address the problem if we don't properly name it. So before we get into everything else, I'm going to let my wonderful panelists introduce themselves. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Davis. I use she, her for pronouns. I'm the Dean of Students and Campus Life at New England Conservatory.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jonas Wright. I'm the Dean of the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, I'm Crystal Sellers-Battle. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Dean of Equity and Inclusion at the Eastman School of Music.
And I'm Kiara Andrews. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions at Mannes School of Music at the New School. I use he, him pronouns, and let's get right on into it. So, what a difference a year makes. So last year we were in Cincinnati in March, and it was wonderful. It was so collaborative. Everyone was really excited. We left with some phenomenal ideas, and Equity Art had, of course, gone through their rebranding, and we were really excited. And then June 29th, 2023 happened. The Supreme Court of the United States struck down affirmative action, and it had direct implications on the jobs that we do. Of course, as Stanford's pointed out earlier, or yesterday in his welcome address, it was purposely vague and decidedly ambiguous, which I personally feel was a direct attack and meant to instill this uncertainty. So how do we deal with all of those things, right? We, as admissions professionals and administrators at colleges, what does that mean for us? In particular, working with an organization like Equity Art, whose goal is to increase the number of Black and brown and underrepresented students in an area that they really have to forge a way in already. So let's start with this question. We are at the tail end of our first admission cycle since this ruling. And if we can all just tell a little bit more about what changes had to be implemented in your offices and where you are now.
So I should say admissions does not fall into my portfolio. I'm here representing our Office of Admissions and Enrollment and Financial Aid, but we work very closely together in student affairs. I think one of the things that changed is one of the things I did last year prior to the ruling was did very intentional outreach to the Black and brown students that were admitted to NEC. So I asked our then Dean of Dean of Admissions, I said, just give me the list, and I'm gonna reach out to these folks, make myself known to them, and ask if they wanna, meet with me over Zoom or over phone calls, them, their mother, their dad, their grandfather, whoever wants to meet with me. And it was great. I had a really great response. I Zoomed with somebody in Uganda, I Zoomed with somebody in Mississippi, and had really great conversations. And so this year, post the overturning, I had to have a conversation with our new Dean of Admissions to say, how can I do that again? And so I can't do that until they say they're coming. So I can't reach out to those students until they say, hey, I'm coming, sign me up. Which for me feels like there's a step in there that's missing, because I think there are students who may not come because they've not had that intentional outreach from me or folks in my office. And so It's a different mindset that we're going into. Fridays actually are our debut days, our admitted student day. So I think we're just all being very, cognizant and conscious of how that outreach piece looks different to students who are accepted versus students who are admitted.
Jonas?
This year we instituted Admitted Students Day. It's the first time we've ever done it before, and it has given us the opportunity to see who everybody is and to work with them and speak with them and give them a chance to meet with all the different administrators that we have and faculty that we have. I think it's an idea actually we took from you all last year. So,
You're welcome. Because we're the first to do an admitted student.
collaboration.
Collaboration.
Yes, love it.
And I think it was your idea to do the virtual 7-Eleven.
Yes.
We're going to steal that next year.
Wait a minute,
Yes.
how are you gonna talk about my thing before I talk about?
Collaboration.
We also are gonna do that idea next year.
Wait a minute.
So, before we go further,
We're just building you up to share this great idea.
That's what it is, I'm gonna blow everyone's
Right.
mind when it gets to me.
we had a conversation about 2 weeks or so ago in order to prepare for this, and immediately ideas just started flowing, right? We, again, addressed the problem, and we were all starting to talk about what can we do. So we're going to come back around to that, but I'm also going to let Crystal explain. Please.
Well, you finish first.
No,
then I'll
go.
explain. So, one of the things that was really important to me about my work is to create community. And a lot of people hear the words diversity, equity, and inclusion and think they mean divisive, evil, and incendiary. And that's not the case, right? And so one of the things that we wanted to do was create a community on audition day. So I happen to have a center in my building, and my colleague Danielle, which is back there, she knows all about this. What I did is I bought every snack on the planet and put it into my office, and we literally call it a 7-Eleven on audition day. And what we found is when we brought students in, we just told people it's free snacks. You have no idea what kind of conversations people were actually able to engage in just because we gave them free food. But what was even more amazing was the emails that came afterwards that said, I feel seen now. And it was something that they didn't say that and this wasn't an organized session, it wasn't come in and listen to me talk for 10 minutes. No, it was just, hey, how are you, where are you from? Let's eat Cheetos. And that conversation has created a pathway in ways that, in the relationship of the conversation. But for us, it really has been, how do we still do the work? And still know that there are marginalized groups that need attention, but to do it in a way that it feels like we are drawing in all, but still getting the special message to those who need it most. So if you all want to do your own 7-Elevens, I would encourage you to call it Wawa or Sheetz or whatever is most appropriate for your area. Whatever it is that's most appropriate in your area, but yes, we do. We have a 7-Eleven. I literally spend at least $3,000 on snacks during audition season just to make and what you find is that families sit there too. I mean, I had, it's amazing. Maybe we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, that's the brilliant idea. Everyone have a 7-Eleven, Wawa, Sheetz, whatever it is, at your audition days.
And at Manus, one of the things we did in terms of the application, taking a step back, was, and I'm sure that many of my colleagues can understand this and attest to this as well. Any questions having to do with race were removed from our application process. Which is, in a way, freeing, right? But also, now that's a point of data we don't have. And to that end, how do we now deal with that, right? That lack of data. And so it became more of an intense part of the cycle for us as the admissions team to really read these applications. Because what's interesting about the ruling is that it says that race can no longer be a part of the decision-making process for our applicants. However, if it affects your culture and what you're presenting, then you can look further into that, or at least ask more questions. And so we decided, while we cannot, and while we will not, break the law, and we're going to come back to that in a second, we will look further into what our applicants are telling us. Because one of the best things about this new generation is that they do not hold back. They are gonna tell you how they feel, they're gonna make a TikTok about it, they're gonna make some reels about it, and they're gonna send you texts if you ask. And so I read so many essays about applicants being affected. Particularly, it was so interesting to see the change from the juniors who became seniors who are now applying, and how this happened over their summer, right? I read at least 15 of them who mentioned specifically how attacked they felt that it happened over the summer. Because now they have to deal with this almost retroactively as they're going into their application season. So let's pivot a little bit more. We have 50 states in our union. There are 28 states, more than half of our states, according to April 5th's Chronicles of Higher Education. 28 states now have anti-DEI legislation on the books. Now, or more accurately, presented. Of these, 12 have already become law, 12 are awaiting final legislative approval, and 35 have been tabled, failed to pass, or vetoed. Now that might sound like a win. That does not mean a win. That means that those laws are now being rewritten and rephrased. So, moving away from administrative aspects, how do you all feel personally in this? Because our work, and of course the work of Equity ARC, is DEI oriented, period. That's what it comes down to. And there's this whole new movement of, didn't earn it, is what DEI means.
Yikes.
Right. What does that mean to you all in terms of this legislation specifically? And then we'll come back to what it means in terms of our positions.
Sure. I think for me, I feel very lucky that I live in the city and the state that I live in. Boston, for the most part, despite its history, we have our Mayor Wu, our first Asian American female mayor, Massachusetts, blue state, thank goodness. But my institution where I work for, the president came out immediately, made a statement in support of our students of color. But I have colleagues all over this country that can't say the same thing. And so I literally have colleagues in Florida who do DEI work who lost their jobs. I've got colleagues in Texas who are, people of color who have lost their jobs because of the laws that have been passed. And so also having come up through, grad school, I remember I went to Michigan State, go green, for grad school, and I know there's Michigan people here, so that was for you. But I remember that was when the affirmative action cases were happening there, and we were literally protesting and picketing at the state capitol. All these years later, to know that, to have that structure, we had a meeting, we were rebuilding our website, and we had a big meeting with 30 people on it with the company that was rebuilding the website the day the ruling came down. And I just was like, can I skip this meeting or turn my camera off? My boss, the provost, he took a moment at the start of the meeting to say, let's just acknowledge what happened today and that this is a rough day for lots of us. And so there's been lots of space to have these conversations. So I feel very lucky, but obviously it is hurtful as a woman of color, as someone who's spent the last 20 plus years working in higher ed, trying to make it more inclusive. It just, I could use some four-letter words, but I won't.
I'll say for me, it's my livelihood.
Right.
The very nature of my position has the words equity and inclusion in it. And I will tell you, after the decision in the summer, it was really, really difficult for me to manage. I had just bought a house, literally right before the decision came out. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Thankfully, I am in a blue state. And so those things they settled for a bit. But I will tell you where the unrest around equity and inclusion officers has continued has been after October 7th. And so I will say, honestly, the somewhat steady ground that I felt like I stood on is now a bit murky again, because now the decisions are being made fiscally rather than being made with the real passion of helping students. And so it is, if I don't get what I want, I will pack up my crayons and go. And so usually those crayons mean significant amounts of money. And so it's, what do we do now? And I hope you all are reading between the lines that I am weaving here. Not to be inappropriate or offensive, but is the reality of DEI officers right now is that that decisions are being made based on money. Blue state, red state, purple state. And so unfortunately that has caused a bit of a sense of ill at ease for me every single day. But I also know that the work still needs to be done. So I just still keep putting projects forward so then I can just say, hey, we're gonna do it anyway. I love not asking for forgiveness or permission. So, it's like those kinds of things, but we're still gonna do the work. It has to be done, so, yeah.
John?
Carrie, you said in the beginning that we shouldn't call it what it is, and it's bullshit. It's just total bullshit. And it's all politics. It isn't based on anything that is real. It is pandering to the outside fringes, which makes it even more frustrating. When we instituted our DEI office and our Associate Dean for DEI is here, Jason Ainsworth, I feel like we saw an immediate change in the way everybody operated and behaved within the conservatory itself, from faculty to staff to the students. I feel very lucky that I'm in California and in the liberal bastion of San Francisco, and we don't have, I think, the same concern and fears that maybe you have, Crystal, which I absolutely understand. But that's the frustrating part to me, is that it really is just politics and it's pandering to the outside edges. And it's done so much good work since we all have started to put these offices into place, and to see them go away is a shame.
I agree. Again, I'm in New York, right? New York City proper. So one would not think that it would affect as much as it does. It's changing a conversation that we really just started to have.
Absolutely.
What's interesting about DEI work, which is really DEIB work, we forget about that belonging aspect, is that it's really all geared towards that, to make students who did not feel as though they belong, no matter their gender, no matter their race, their orientation, because it's more than just one aspect, to make them no longer feel as though they belong is something that is really difficult for me, because that's, I think, one of my joys in this work, the connection aspect. While we, again, as someone mentioned earlier, we become travel agents during the fall season, we are on the road sometimes 2 to 3 weeks at a time, visiting literally hundreds of applicants. And to see their reactions when you're talking about what's on campus and how many people look like them and where they can go in terms of organizations, that was so fulfilling, because it felt like we were doing what we needed to do. And now, just that moment of doubt, just that second guessing, can I say this now? Or maybe I shouldn't say this at all, and just tell my colleagues and put a note in it, and we'll come back, make a note in Slate, and it's so, y'all know. But then even that, what can we write down?
Yeah.
What can we no longer say? It's a hindrance that our work did not need. We just didn't need it. And I felt just as we were really starting to make progress, a wall came down. And it's a big wall to scale. But taking that idea,
Can I piggyback on that?
please,
Just a second?
absolutely you
I
can.
just wanted to say also, it has been a learning curve for our faculty.
Yes.
Because when they come into auditions, I could walk in the room and I'm pretty certain no one would ever say, I wonder if she's black. And so so now our faculty are thinking, wow, this person would be a wonderful asset because of that element. But we have to then say to them, you can't talk about this. And so that has been troubling for them. Often I'm the person that they come to when they want me to sweet talk admissions to get them to bring a particular student in. They think I have that kind of power. I don't. But the thing is that we've had to say to them, these particular things you've thought of and you think are well-meaning can no longer be written down. We cannot have a record of the thought that, wow, we think this person would bring such a wonderful, diverse perspective to our institution. We can't say that anymore. And so teaching that to faculty has been a real challenge this year.
Oh, fully agreed. One of the things that we instituted, and we're gonna, if you all wouldn't mind adding on to this as well, we spoke a little bit about it earlier, but how has the process itself changed? Before we get to the decisions part, how has the process itself changed? We made a section in our application that strongly encourages applicants to include pieces from their cultural backgrounds, right? This is not really something new that I describe Manus as aggressively progressive. Proudly so, very proudly so. It's always kind of been a part of what we did, but now we're more empowered to emphasize it. To say, you know, if you have a piece from your background that means a lot to you, that, you know, falls within the parameters of what we would have asked you to do anyway, bring that piece in. And our faculty love that. We, honestly, going through the notes, I always saw a note about this particular piece that they had never heard before. Because one of the good things about this, one of the silver linings, is that while it's troubling, we now have to find new ways to get, again, that piece earlier, get that data without the data number. But what differences have you all put into the process of what you all do? And, I mean, I guess, if you can speak to it, what are the results so far?
Sure, so similarly to Crystal, I know our Dean of Admission at a faculty council meeting with all the chairs had to basically say, I need you all to be sort of extra, she had to have a conversation with them about what they basically could and could not write as they're taking notes during auditions. And to your point, it was definitely, I think, eye-opening for the faculty to have to think about something that they've been so intentional about thinking about in a different way. And so there was a lot of conversation. We did bring in our Director of Culture, Equity and Belonging, Monique, to have those conversations. So I think we've been more intentional throughout the audition process. So at an audition day, there's always a panel or a conversation with myself or someone from the Office of Academic and Student Affairs, either myself or my colleague leading Academic Affairs. We're present at auditions, talking to the students and their parents and families. We've done a lot with our marketing and communications team around a huge yield campaign. So I feel like every day there's another video on Instagram or I'm not on TikTok, but I think TikTok is apparently a thing that our students love. And so there's, I know what TikTok is, but there's always an effort to think innovatively and creatively about getting the message about what it is to be an NEC student. So they did a video, they sort of cut together different folks from across campus, so myself, some of the chairs, students, and sort of talking about here's what it means to be an NEC student, here's what it means to live in a city like Boston. And then this upcoming Friday at debut day, as we call it, there's several meet and greets, there's lunches, there's just gonna be opportunity for folks to meet, with myself, members of our team, are opening up our Center for Culture, Equity, and Belonging. So I think we're just having to be more intentional and have different touch points throughout the admissions process. And then, as I said, once they say they're coming, I'm emailing them all to say, hey, let's have a conversation. Let me talk to whoever is in your life helping you make this decision, and let me answer all the questions you have about living in Boston, being at NEC. And so I think we're just having to take more measured steps throughout the process.
We have tried to look at it as an opportunity, and as the admission folks know in the room, every chance you get to make a connection with a prospective student, the better you are, and the better you have to try to yield that student. And so really just trying to do a lot more of that than we've done previously, trying to use social media as much as possible to show the diversity of our staff and our faculty, so students can see themselves there and feel welcome there. Some deans do TikTok. Christina.
I do Instagram. I can't learn another thing. I'm sorry.
You're saving yourself hours. You're saving yourself hours. So we really try to take it as an opportunity, really just to make better connections with students and really offer a lot of Zoom sessions too with prospective students that have questions. Same thing. What's the city like? What's the academics like? What are the musical life like? So. As annoyed and angry as I can be about it, it is just trying to take as an opportunity. So.
And I kind of feel that's the way the pandemic did for us. We had to do a pivot and do it quickly and start thinking about what to do and how to engage. And so the admissions department at Eastman must like me a lot because they put me on display on the audition days. But no, we have the veritable 7-Eleven, but we also have a student panel that I moderate. And then I also have a letter that is given to all accepted students that is sent out from me. I actually do some virtual meetups. As a matter of fact, I'm doing one in a couple of weeks with our affinity-based student organizations at Eastman to introduce those to our students. And so that I'm moderating, but really letting our students tell the story, because that is the power of creating connection, is making sure that the students are present. So I have all my student workers like, okay, during this open hour, I need you to man the 7-Eleven. They're there for restocking and conversation. And that is where the power is engaging and empowering students to be able to give a message that the news or the media may be saying differently. So empowering students is a huge part of it.
I love that, thank you all. So, again, we've talked about the changes of the effects, the ramifications of the decision, and how it affects our work. What further can we do in the spirit of collaboration to make things move as smoothly as possible moving forward? I love the 7-Eleven idea. What else can we do? And we spoke a little bit about it before, but what other ideas can we share that can address the issue without addressing the issue?
Sure. One of the things we talked about on our call was a lot of our institutions are kind of located near each other, in that northeast corridor or not too far away. And so thinking about making the audition process more accessible, thinking about ways to, I was talking to Katie Llewellyn, who's our Dean of Admissions, and she said we've sort of gotten away, the pandemic obviously had to pivot, and there was a lot more opportunity for students to audition virtually, and there was a lot more engagement virtually, and we've kind of gotten away from that, is my understanding from her. And so I think thinking about bringing some of those things back and making the audition process more accessible, thinking about how we're doing that outreach, I think would be helpful. And also taking advantage of institutions that are potentially close to each other. How can we get, students to our campuses in a way that's, easier for them and their parents and families.
I want to see us move from one C word to another. I want to see us move from being competitors to being collaborators. Mm-hmm. I really think that all of us have one or two really great ideas, one or two really great things that we do, and that we should really share them with each other and work together in that way. I also think that all of our schools offer something that is unique to the student that comes to us. Mm-hmm. And the student that's going to come to SFCM might not be the right student for NEC and vice versa, and Eastman and vice versa, and Madison and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be a competitive landscape. Mm-hmm. It should be a collaborative landscape.
And I think one of the things that we did at Eastman that's really, really helpful is Danielle, who I'm going to mention again, she is actually one of our admissions professionals who is specifically connected to my office. Mm. So we are doing strategic pipeline work together. We're doing some first generation college student work that is happening. And so we get to start it from the beginning, and then she's actually, even though she's in admissions, usually at the front end of the process, she actually will be able to continue to weave through that 4-year experience for those students. And so having someone that is deeply connected, I mean, hopefully all of your admissions professionals are, but sometimes it takes a little bit of extra work now that post-SCOTUS decision. If you can find someone that's strategically placed to do that work in your admissions office, I think it will make the process work really well.
Agreed. One of the things and we talked about a little bit before, I've been toying with is similar to what Equity Arc is doing with the musician database. One of the things I noticed this year, and this affects all students, so we can make the message wide while hopefully tailoring it a little bit more, is that applicants may not necessarily know what to expect when they come to audition. And all of our schools are, unfortunately, competitive. In that regard, we don't compete with each other, but we are seen as competitive within the industry, right? I would love to, and it can be as simple as a Google form, maybe, but someone at the school, in our admissions departments, fill out a bit of a survey about what to expect on the day of the audition. And maybe in the days leading up to the audition. I found that there is a lot of misinformation. And that's some of it with the best of intentions. But to have a student come in, and I was working the check-in table at auditions, and say, "Hi, how are you doing?" And they just start saying words. They're not listening to my question at all. And I was like, I just needed to know your name. Just your name. And then they'll say parts of their name, and I'm like, that's interesting. That was an interesting choice. So I would love to break that down and let them know what we offer specifically for if we have a 7-Eleven, if we have different admitted students event. Just give them that information ahead of time so that maybe it will help ease some of those nerves, right? And I know any of the parents, any of the Pathways professionals who work in here, you all know how those students, especially as those audition days come, they are tight. They are wrapped around, and we want them to do well, right? The better they do, the easier our jobs are. And admittedly, I think, the Voice and X Factor and American Idol, oh my God, I'm dating myself, they have made this sense of really poor competition, whereas we want you to do well. Our applicants, we are your biggest advocates, period. And I think that anything that we can do to help mitigate all of that cloudiness, I think will hopefully lead to some more clarity and more ease. And I think that's hopefully the heart of DEIB work in general, right? Before we let's actually open it up to questions. We can do that.
The only way you can age yourself is if you say talent search.
Oh my God! Wait! Talent search or star search?
Star search. Star search. Yeah.
We just did it. You all just saw that happen in real time.
In real time.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So, and we can feel free to ask more questions if we'd like. But are there any questions that you all would like to ask? Feel free.
Be a little bit off topic, but maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Are the changes influencing the hiring process of faculty?
The question was, are the changes influencing the hiring impacts on faculty, correct? Yes. For us, no. We've always had a feeling of get whoever we can that our students will connect with, and who is the best that we have available. One of the interesting things about Manus in particular is that 85% of our faculty are adjunct, and that they're teaching and they're working professionally, right? They are teaching in the morning and then going to the Met or Lincoln Center. They're performing at night on stage throughout the city. So if they can do the job, that's really all we care about, and that's what we've always cared about. And so that's a very point of pride for me. I don't think for us it doesn't.
It hasn't impacted our hiring processes, but we are still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because we feel like this may be the entree, the first step to get us into, challenging hiring processes. But one of the things that we have been doing very strategically at our institution is that every faculty finalist has to meet with me. And last year we had 42, and I met with every single one of them. And it was to convey to them the importance of equity and inclusion work, because it's a work for all of us, not for some of us. And so it was really important to have that conversation. This year I had 16, I think I had to meet with. But still, it's the conversation of letting them know before you even decide to sign on the dotted line, this is what you're signing up for. But I hope that I'll still be able to have those conversations if the other shoe does drop. We're sitting on edge just in case.
Is the really the decision maker on hiring faculty, I don't think it has changed the way we look at it. But I do think I have a new bullet point for you, Jason, to meet with our newest hires.
I'm writing it down right now.
I actually meet with them when they're there on their interview too. And then they meet with me twice a year during their first year to help with syllabi creation, to help them think about ways they can engage, avoiding microaggressions in the classroom, that sort of thing. And that has been a powerful opportunity for us to have in the first year.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's impacted our faculty hiring, but I am concerned, like you said, about the other shoe dropping, and then ultimately the pipeline of faculty and staff, administrators into college campuses, given the ruling, but it has not impacted our hiring, I don't believe.
Very good question. Yes?
This is a little long, I'm gonna try to make it short, I'm so sorry. But, so as a Black woman who participated in the college audition and interview process, I feel like discussing my identity was something that was important for the faculty to understand my experience as a musician. But a lot of the times the faculty who interviewed me, or even just maybe outreach things that I participated in, just talking just as a prospective student, most of them were not people of color or anyone of marginalized gender identity or anything. And it kind of felt like they were seeing me but not hearing me. And I just wonder, because of the events of the affirmative action movement return, how you feel like maybe people in these outreach positions or people who work with missions can be receptive to these unique experiences without breaking the law or anything like that. But yeah, that's
The question was, when you are in a room sharing your personal experiences with people who may not understand them, they can see you but not fully hear you. And what can we do to mitigate that, and what can we, essentially, I just want to make sure I'm paraphrasing you correctly. Great, okay. What I can say, at least for us at Manus, our faculty will ask us, they will ask the admissions team, we had this great candidate, and there were so many things that, they brought up about their piece, particularly for composition majors. You're composition, right? Yeah. When you said that interview, I was like, oh yeah, that's part of the reason we have the interview, right? Because it's one thing to present a piece, or you upload your piece, it plays, but without that cultural context, it is missing a point. And so our faculty will ask us, what can we say, or can we ask? And whatever you want to ask is okay, but again, we tell them, just remember in your notes, address the piece, not the person. And that has helped tremendously, because they're still able to convey what they need to convey to us, and it's reflective in their scoring, without in any way breaking the law. And to that point, I think it's really, really interesting that we're right around the corner from John Lewis Way, because he was famous for getting in good trouble, and I think that we might have to soon I think what we're doing right now is trying to find that good trouble, right? At first it was just problematic. Now we're trying to find good trouble within it.
I think I would also say, it connects, it goes to a little bit of what Zachary mentioned last night about the ways in which we program music. Because the problem is that we are putting pieces by BIPOC composers on the stand and asking them to read the black but not the lines in between. What made them do what they did here? What made them add this sound or this sonority here? And so what it is be unapologetically you. And if there was anything that I would say, because what I want us to do is to stop just putting pieces on the stand just to say, we checked a box. Because if you know because you want to know the rhythm but not the blues, you gotta know both of them in order to make the piece work. And so I think what happens is people get really scared about that aspect of you that has inspired the music that you write. But I think the best advice I could give is that you continue to be apologetically you, and then us as administration call our ensemble conductors to task and say, if you're gonna put a piece by Dela, right? If you put a piece by Dela on the stand, you need to ask Dela why Dela put this here. Or even if Dela's not, or if it's William Grant Still, we don't have access, get a historian to say, why is this there? Because I think the conversations with you and your creation will get better if we start thinking about what the end result is, and that is telling the story of the rhythm and the blues of the people who wrote it by putting the music on the stage.
You know, I think, you know, to address your question, the part about feeling you're seeing both, you're both being seen and heard, it comes to really diversifying the faculty and the staff. And we have a systemic problem in music education where it's heavily white and or Asian. And we do this thing, or we had done this thing, I think, where at least at SFCM, when we would be hiring a staff member, an admissions person, a financial aid person, whoever it is, we would, for some reason, think that they'd have to have a music background in order to do that job, and they don't. There are a lot of really talented people out there that are outside of teaching music. Yes, I want a violinist to teach violin. Same. Christina. So, I mean, part of that probably is because I am not a trained musician and I feel so strongly about it, but we have started to make a lot of changes when we hire that say, look, you don't have to have a music background. We just want the most talented person in financial aid, in student billing, in whatever it might be, and we've really been very successful in diversifying in that way, and I would encourage everybody to think that way.
I have a music background, and my first voice lesson is the reason why I do the work that I do. My very first voice lesson, my voice teacher said, you're either gonna be a classical singer or a gospel singer, you can't do both. Pick one today. And she told me to pick classical. And so that was the first reason why I decided to go in equity and inclusion work. It was my very first voice lesson in my undergrad experience. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave it that way.
No.
I just wanted to be honest about why we need to have people who understand that our students are coming from more backgrounds. You know, we are now outside of the radio generation. Our generation used to listen to the radio and hear similar things. The Spotify generation, they can go from heavy metal to Beethoven to Miles Davis to SpongeBob. Like, I mean, literally, it's a whole mixture. And all of those influences influence the way in which they approach the music. And unfortunately, sometimes we in our higher education institutions tell people to walk away from that aspect of themselves, and that's so unfair.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
I have a question for Crystal. So at IU, we have run into some challenges being a school of music within a larger university. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about being a music school within a larger university.
Ooh, Jesus, yes. Yes, so Eastman is a part of the University of Rochester system, and right now they are very much, their tagline is one university. And what's becoming a real challenge is that one university in the engineering department feels very different than one university in the music department. And so all they see are dollar signs. But what we're hoping to be able to convey to people that the front porches of institutions are their music department and their athletics, because that's what brings the public into the institution. And so having that conversation about the fact that we are doing something a little different is actually bolstering the reputation of the entire institution and not some. But yeah, that's, woo, yeah. Sorry, I'm having PTSD right now. But yes, there is a real challenge because the idea of trying to run the institution the same way as it works in it. The medical school will never be the music school. The, College of Arts and Sciences will never be the music school. And not only that, they want to come up with a one university funding model, and that funding model does not work equally as well. And so those challenges are being able to have someone at the table that wants to also understand that we have to articulate our difference. And I know Abra is doing that, but making sure that the conversation is about articulating what is similar as well as what is different and what makes us unique. But that context of school inside of a larger institution is really challenging.
And in terms of like the SCOTUS decision that happened, letting the university as a whole know what the needs of the music school are and how much we've been trying to move in a certain direction and then sort of being pushed back, especially at the university level because they want to toe the line with the state government, with the federal government. I know New York is different because you all are a blue state and we are not.
I actually like to think of New York being purple because New York City carries us.
Yeah.
Because where we live,
Night and day.
yeah,
night and day.
where I live, it's looking real red where I live. But I like to think of New York as more purple, and New York City has just carried the weight for us for years. But yeah, that because that's the other piece of it. One of the things that people are saying, oh, well, you're in a politically blue state, you'll be fine, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. But there are some decisions that are being made that don't even rise to whatever the highest level of political structure are. There are county level decisions that are being made. There are city level decisions, municipal level decisions that are being made that impact the work that we're doing. And so we have to not always rely on the larger state structure because there are some real serious, even Board of Regents for states are making decisions about DEI work. And so you have to be really cognizant of who's making the decisions because it doesn't necessarily mean who voted for president is actually going to say, is my job secure or not?
And I'm going to, McKee, may I have one more question? Okay, we have one more question, please.
So one of the things that I've had conversations with some of the pathways managers is the cost of applying to colleges. So whether, and we're not just talking application fees, obviously we're talking about trial lessons and travel to audition sites. And I was wondering what the conversations are at your institutions about that barrier for students of color.
I'll quickly address that. There are several organizations, that we are all a part of, that is a topic for sure. There are some institutions, and you will need to, our applicants will need to reach out to the individual admissions departments, and it is a little bit more footwork, or groundwork, I should say, but there are some discretionary funds from some departments that are available for things like travel. There are some institutions that you will allow, students, they will bring students on and allow them to do an overnight stay on, if they have a dorm on campus. Those things are, Oberlin, yes? Yeah, Oberlin does that. And so reach out to your admissions departments for one. Two, there was some reticence about this, I think definitely before COVID, but video auditions are still possible, right? And because of COVID, I think our faculty, all of our faculty have become much more receptive to those video auditions. There is, of course, the aspect, and I'm a huge advocate of being able to come to campus, and those are things, admittedly, we're still working on. We're not just talking about coming to campus, we're talking about coming to New York City, right? And so we are always trying to figure out what we can do, which is why one of the things that we do as Manus, Manhattan School of Music, and Juilliard is coordinate our auditions to happen all within the same 10-day period. So at least you only have to make one trip to New York City as opposed to multiple. Little things we noticed about that a couple years ago we started to do, but that is admittedly very much a challenge. It's a big challenge.
Yeah, I would just say we are not doing enough, and this is a conversation I had when we were hiring our new dean of admissions, and so she and I are this is her first cycle. She started in November, so we're just starting to talk about how we can better collaborate, my office, her office, our Center for Culture, Equity, Belonging, about that process. So we're just having those sort of first conversations about it, but we're definitely not doing enough, for sure.
We're working through that as well. We have a lot of people who we simply say, just ask. And a lot of times when they do ask, the opportunities to get reduced or application fees reduced, audition fees, that sort of thing can happen. But we still don't have enough. But we're working, that's one of the things that we're thinking about. It's in the works of endowing the office that I'm in, and that's one of the projects that I'm interested in, is thinking about how we can create an opportunity for auditions to not be cost prohibitive.
The other thing that I'll add is it's a good investment to waive a admission fee. It's a good investment to buy a plane ticket for a student to come out and audition. When you think about it, It's a few $100s to get a student out via a plane from somewhere in the US, $500-600. But if they're going to be a tuition-paying student, then
Exactly.
that's a great investment. And it really, I think it allows the school to show the student, the prospective student, how invested we are in them and how important we think that they are. So I would say any admissions folks, go back to your dean and let them know that it is a good investment. It really is.
Absolutely.
And on that note, thank you all so much for your time, for your insight, for your A huge thank you to Equity Park and to McGee. Please notice, and thank you all so much for being here.